Hello, and welcome back to this week's episode of Comp Talk. My name is Todd Thams, and today we're going to talk about one of the biggest headaches that business owners have, and it is uninsured subcontractors on the workers' compensation policy. This issue has been going on for at least a decade or more. And the issue is that if your business subcontracts out work to an uninsured subcontractor, your business will end up paying for that on the workers' compensation policy. This is it's really a big problem in the contracting industry, construction, landscaping, flooring, those type of things. Anything where there's subcontracted work becomes a big problem. And here's why it's a problem. So if I'm a sole proprietor and I own my own company and I do work myself and I don't have any employees, why would I purchase workers' compensation insurance? Uh, there's really no reason for me to. It's an added expense that most sole proprietors or partnerships don't want, and there's no employees for them to cover. So why would they purchase workers' compensation? They wouldn't. The problem is further compounded by the fact that they may not be able to buy workers' compensation on themselves. The reality is most subcontractors, there's no payroll. It's very hard to track payroll. Um, and so there's not enough premium there for the insurance company to even write a policy. If you ask a subcontractor how much money they make in payroll, they're going to say none. If they want a policy and they have a claim where now they want a paycheck or an indemnity because they can't work, there's nothing for the insurance company to go back and look at because everything's been hidden. So it becomes really problematic. There's also some underwriting requirements. Usually, if a if an individual subcontractor wants coverage in the workers' compensation world, the work comp carrier is going to want to make sure that they have a health insurance policy, dental covers themselves, those type of things, because the insurance company does not want they don't want the people using the work comp policy as a medical policy. So there's the reality right there. Sole proprietors of partnerships who don't have employees aren't required to purchase workers' compensation. The problem is that when they do work for you, they're legally entitled to use your business's workers' compensation policy if they're injured. Happens all the time. Um, we see a lot where there isn't even a legal agreement in place in terms of the responsibilities of the subcontractor to the contractor. That becomes compounded when there's a claim, and we're basically just referring back to state law at that point, as opposed to what the general and what the subcontractor have agreed to beforehand. So I'm not here to dispute or argue whether an independent contractor should be covered on the work comp policy or not. I don't necessarily agree with it. That was never the intent, but that certainly seems to be what's happening today. And so insurance companies, they have the belief that if they have to pay out for an uninsured subcontractor, they're going to go ahead and collect a premium for the uninsured subcontractor. Where I live in rural Iowa, this can be a huge issue um, all the time. There's a lot of smaller sole proprietors doing work for other people, and it becomes a problem at audit time. So, what can a business really do? If you're a business that's hiring subcontractors, you could require that subcontractor to purchase what's called a ghost work comp policy. And a ghost work comp policy, in the simplest sense of the term, is a fake workers' compensation policy that provides no coverage to the sole proprietor, but complies with various state laws and shows to your auditor that this subcontractor actually purchased workers' compensation insurance. So the sole proprietor goes out and they purchase a ghost work comp policy that excludes coverage on themselves. So really there's no substance in the work comp policy because a ghost work comp policy is not going to cover, for the most part, any W 2 employees because they don't exist. The owner of this company is going to exclude themselves. but they actually get an insurance company along with a policy number to put on that certificate of insurance, which then allows them to probably get more jobs than they normally would. We see a lot of businesses who don't even want to mess around with an uninsured subcontractor. They don't know what they're going to get charged. They don't know what the project's going to cost. They don't want the liability of having an uninsured subcontractor on their policy. So the easiest way is to simply have that subcontractor purchase a ghost work comp policy. The benefit of that is, let's say that you're a contractor that uses subs. The last thing that you want is that subcontractor using your workers' compensation policy. The last thing you want is that $500,000 claim with indemnity that your insurance company is paying on, that's going on your loss history, that's going to affect your future workers' compensation mod for the next 3 years, all because of an uninsured subcontractor. I mean, you as the business who's doing the hiring has a ton of risk out here for the uninsured subcontractor who has none. And we've seen even in the construction industry where they want to know what the experience mod number is of a company. Now, NCCI says that that's not supposed to be used like that, but we're seeing where if a business has a mod over one, they're not allowed to work for certain large companies. They're not allowed to bid for large companies. And I'd hate to see a business not be able to bid on that because they had an uninsured subcontractor use their workers' compensation policy and cost that business dearly. There could be non-renewals. It really is just a whole mess. So a ghost work comp policy. Usually those are fairly inexpensive. They cost less than $1,000 a year from what we're seeing. Most times maybe 450 to 650. It's a pretty cheap way for that sole proprietor to comply with a general's insurance requirements. And the general then doesn't have to risk their policy because they have a subcontractor who has the right coverages in place. We'll have some resources here on the Comp Effect podcast just to help out when it comes to audits. Um, there's a couple things that your business should know when doing an audit, um, as to how if you have an uninsured subcontractor, how your business should pay for those. So let's say you don't have actual payroll records. There are actually rules in the book that you can separate out price versus labor, things like that, to reduce the cost that a subcontractor is charging you. For example, one of the rules is if the job involves labor and materials, the minimum calculation of additional premium shall not be less than 50% of the subcontracted price. That's if you don't have physical payroll records on what you paid that subcontractor. So I know audits can be stressful and we don't want to have businesses overpay. So we're going to put this resource on our website, for audits and things that businesses should be aware of when it comes to accounting for an uninsured subcontractor on their audit. Well, we hope this information was helpful. Best practice: hire a sub that has a ghost work comp policy. Don't let them use yours under any circumstances. Uh, Hire an attorney, especially if you do a lot of subcontracting work, and have them draft an actual insurance agreement. You can use your agent in partnership with that. They can probably give you some recommendations based upon your unique situation. I always recommend that your insurance agent and your attorney work together to create that document that's going to protect your company in the event of a claim, and make sure you can get back to business the next day. So thanks so much for listening. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you again soon.